In May 1979, bombs went off in Maseru, Lesotho's capital. One hit the little country's main post office, another damaged Maseru's main power station. Earlier that year, a parcel bomb had also gone off in Maseru. Chief Lebowa's BNP government finally realized what was happening and declared a state of emergency in June. July was uneasily quiet as people became more and more nervous. Then, in August, that silence was shattered when another bomb went off at a police border post in Botabothe in northern Lesotho, killing a policeman and 2 civilians. After the bombing of the police border post, Lesotho started to fall into chaos, and the group responsible for all this chaos was the Lesotho Liberation Army. The LLA was the armed wing of the Basotho Congress Party in exile. After their failed 1974 coup, many BCP members fled the country, including its leader Notso Mokehle. Mokehle turned to the co-founder of the BCP, Podlako Lebalo, for help. Podlako Lebalo had gone on to be a prominent figure in the South African Pan-Africanist Congress, which in 1974 was in disarray. When Gaddafi's Libya offered to help train the PAC's armed wing, the PAC could only muster 24 recruits. The PAC hoped that if it helped the BCP, it would solve its own manpower shortage. The first group of the 33 BCP exiles arrived in Libya in late 1974. The next year, 96 more BCP recruits would arrive. More recruits were also sent to Syria and Tanzania. In 1976, both the PAC and the BCP received a massive boost when, in the aftermath of the Soweto uprising, the PAC received 500 new recruits, which included 178 Basotho migrant miners. Although the LLA was now a few hundred men strong, their small force was plagued with ill discipline, interfighting, and constant division with the PAC. Those divisions would worsen as the LLA found itself caught up in a rivalry between the Maoist and nationalist factions within the Pan-Africanist Congress. Some PAC leaders even wanted to completely absorb the BCP, so it could use its links with Basotho migrant miners working on South Africa's mines to raise money for the PAC. Notso Mokehle refused. Podlako Lebalo, in turn, refused to supply arms to the LLA. As the rivalry between the Maoist and nationalist factions started to become more violent, Notso Mokehle decided to leave Libya and set up the new LLA headquarters in Botswana. It was from here that the LLA would plan its first incursion into Lesotho. In short, it went terribly. As they crossed into South Africa, they were all caught by the South African police, including the LLA's whole high command, except for Mokehle. Meanwhile, back in Lesotho, Chief Jonathan's BNP government was dealing with its own problems. They were struggling to develop Lesotho's economy, which was completely dependent on South Africa, and ever since the BNP seized power by force in 1970, it lacked both domestic and international credibility. The BNP's alignment with apartheid South Africa was isolating Lesotho and leaving the so-called Mountain Kingdom at the risk of also becoming a pariah state. In a desperate bid to win back some credibility and secure some much-needed foreign aid, Chief Lebowa began openly criticizing South Africa and condemning apartheid. He began forging links with the ANC. He also started reaching out to communist nations as he established diplomatic relations with the Soviet Union, Cuba, and North Korea. and after 1976 he opened up Lesotho to political exiles and to ANC operatives. Although these steps did win Lesotho back some international credibility and even some foreign aid, it was a dangerous, maybe even a foolish game. Lesotho's economy was severely dependent on South Africa. In fact, over 70% of the BNP government's revenue came from customs unions with South Africa, and around half of Lesotho's gross national income came from the salaries of Basotu's working on South Africa's mines, which employed over 140,000 Basotus. Should Jonathan anger South Africa, this would all be gone. And if South Africa ever decided to invade Lesotho, there was nothing Lesotho's small police force could do. And then there was another problem. When the Basotho National Party was elected in 1965, it ran on an anti-communist platform. The BNP's main backers were the Catholic Church and tribal chiefs, particularly the lesser chiefs. The police force and civil service were all staffed with highly conservative, traditionally minded Catholics, as were most of Lebowa's supporters. Chief Jonathan's new pro-communist diplomacy was offending many of them. Should Jonathan lose their support, he would be left without a base. Jonathan's links with the communists and talk of land reform were beginning to cause a rift in his own party. Back in South Africa in 1978, the captured LLA men were taken to Pretoria after their first failed incursion, where they were taken to meet the Department of National Security. The South Africans offered an alliance and to arm and support their insurgency. It was said the LLA only had 13 rifles and 4 AK-47s at the organization's disposal. So with the offer of support from South Africa, it's not hard to guess what the LLA's response was. The next year, the war began. In 1979, after the attack at the police border post in August, more bombs went off in Maseru and in Mafeteng, Lesotho's third largest city. Then, in November, the LLA struck again in the Bothebothe district. Various government facilities and fuel depots were attacked. The prominent BNP chief Lepatwe Mao was shot in his village. The government mobilized Lesotho's police mobile unit and began a clampdown in Bothebothe, where 15 BCP supporters were killed. Panic gripped Lesotho as hundreds of BCP supporters began fleeing the country for the fear of government reprisals. Then, in December, Notso Mokhehle came out of the shadows and issued a statement. He announced that the LLA had begun a civil war to overthrow Chief Lebowa and that they had hundreds of men in the deep Lesotho mountains, ready to be unleashed against the government. Lesotho was now at war, and its deteriorating relationship with South Africa could only spell chaos for the little country. The so-called Kingdom in the Sky's future was growingly uncertain.